Okay, so good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Back. We're continuing learning brachot. Maybe we'll do one or two more sessions on brachot and then move on to some other topics. But there's so much in brachot, such a rich and relevant and meaningful topic. So it's fun to learn it and fun to discuss together. I want to talk a little bit about Hashem's name, because a lot of the questions around brachot, which do we say? What happens if you say the wrong one? Should we say a bracha? Should we not say a bracha? A lot of that revolves around Shem Hashem, the name of God, and a certain dual-natured relationship that we have to the name of God, which we're going to see, which begins really in the Torah and then expands into the Halacha as well. And I think just having some insight into that dual relationship, or two sides of the relationship, will shed light on some of the other kind of more micro halachic points that arise, but I think really stem from this fundamental dichotomy that we have in relating to Hashem's name. So it begins in the Torah. I picked from Shemot here on the source sheet, but we read it yesterday in Shul. In the Ten Commandments, we have Lo Tisa, right? Lo Tisa Hashem Hashem Elokecha Lashav. Do not lift up God's name in vain. Ki lo yanakeh Hashem et asher yisa shmo lashav. For God will not cleanse one who, here the Sephira translated as swears falsely, but really Yisa means to, like Yisa Hashem panav elecha, like to lift up, right? So in the Ten Commandments, we don't want to, it says very clearly, don't take Hashem's name in vain, though it's understood, it's understood as meaning swearing, but really I think the pshat is even more expansive. It's really don't use it, don't lift it up, don't just toss it around in vain. God will not look upon that kindly. It's not a good thing. Just curious, why is it, let's put a little tamei hamitzvot here. Right, there's a big discussion in Judaism, right? Should we give reasons for the mitzvot or not? We tend to say you can give reasons, but we shouldn't assume that our reasons are the reasons. But it's a good exercise generally, although there are some that say we shouldn't at all, just accept them and don't really question it all. But I like the approach that we can think about them. What do you think is the rationale, or a rationale, behind this prohibition of taking God's name in vain? Why would one of the 10 commandments be, don't use the name of God lightly, don't lift it up and toss it around? Any thoughts?
To show respect towards God.
Right.
So we have respect for others.
That's right. Can you think of a parallel in our world where we wouldn't throw someone's name? Like, what's an example of that? How does that the way of showing respect is to not say their name? How might that work? Or what's a parallel in our world that we can relate to?
Well, with your honoring your parents, also respecting them.
Yeah, right. Generally, we don't call our parents. Like one time, my son called me. He called me bro. He was like, "Hey, bro," and I was like, "No." You don't call me bro, you call me Abba. Don't take my name lightly. I mean, it wasn't my name. But also, I think this is, in some circles, this is a thing where you call your parents by their first names. But generally, I think most of the world views that as a kind of disrespect, right? To use their name lightly. So in many cultures, right, there's for people we respect, there's like a third grammatical form that we use. We don't use their first names, right? When we think about, public officials, right? When you go to the court, you don't say the judge's first name is Marvin. You don't say, "Hey, Marvin." You say, "Your Honor, Judge so-and-so," right? You use the last name, not the first name. So there's something about, there's like an intimacy or a familiarity that using a common or an intimate name a lot can be, disrespectful. Any other thoughts? Why we don't use God's name a lot? The additional is like Hashem's name is, in addition to respect, we also believe there's like power in the name, right? It's not just a sign of. It certainly is, like Larry said, there is kavod, but also it has spiritual power, and something about using that a lot, could be dangerous, or could be just like inappropriate spiritually, in addition to the respect piece. So that's the Ten Commandments. But then we have another verse. Right? Make me an altar of earth, make your sacrifices. In every place where I cause my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you. That seems to be like a different idea, that Hashem's name being out in the world is a good thing, and we want it to be like it's a blessing, right? Hashem's name, every place where Hashem's name is mentioned is a blessing, is a good thing. And so if we were thinking back to the question of brachot, right? If we just look at source 1, don't take my name in vain, we'd be very careful. Like, wow, really, when you say your bracha, is like, know exactly what you're doing. Do not mess around. Do not screw up. If you have to err on the side of not saying, you don't want to take it in vain. But then the flip is this verse, which says, like, my name being called in the world, my name being remembered in the world, will cause you blessing and will be a blessing in the world. And, we think about one of the greatest mitzvahs a Jew can do, Kiddush Hashem, right? Sanctifying the name. And how do you sanctify the name? You go out in the world and you do stuff. And you do good things, and that's a sanctification of the name, and that's like a great, great thing. You bring God's name into all kinds of places. You bring it into the street. You bring it into the market. You bring it into, the professional world. You're bringing Hashem's name into the world. It's a great mitzvah, causes blessings. So that might kind of bring us on the other side, right? We want Hashem's name to be in the world. That's maybe part of like our mission, to be bearers of Hashem's name in the world. There are sources that talk about it like that. So can you see a bit of a tension there between those two? And how brachot might be a kind of a nexus of that tension, right? Brachot, something where we're explicitly commanded to evoke Hashem's name, and at the same time, with both the goal of bringing Hashem's name into the world and causing blessing, and also at the same time trying to be very careful and show honor and respect to the name, and also maybe be even careful about the name's power and not to abuse it or use it too much. So that's the basic tension. Any thoughts or reactions there?
Well, like if you eat without a bracha, that's not good. So we want to praise and bless Dad. So we want to do it. We just want to do it properly. Right.
Melissa, were you going to say something?
Just only the care you have to take is to only bring it in for good, whether it's your action or your speech, and that the care seems to be around, yes, please do it, but only in the following way, which reminds me of like prescribed medicine is the same thing. It's very, very, well, it would be very, very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Even people say miraculous, but if you use it wrongly, it has the opposite effect.
Right. That's a nice analogy, like medicine, right? Which has the power to, very nice, which has the power to do good if in the right dosage, but if in the wrong way, it can kill you. Very dangerous. Nice. Okay, good. So I want to show you this is a kind of a wild Gemara that deals with it. So I'm going to make it a little bigger. So this is a Gemara in Brachot. So the sages v'itkinu sheyeh adam sho'elet shalom chaveiro b'Hashem. The sages established hitkinu. Whenever we see that word hitkinu, that means instituted, which means it was a new thing, right? It didn't exist before. A takana. A takana is like a rabbinic decree, enactment. It's almost like a legislation. It's a law or a concept which didn't really exist before. So they come along and they have this new idea, a new takana. And this is the sages. This is the sages of the Talmud, right? This is like the sages of the Mishnah, right? So these are the Tanaim. This is probably Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the generation that spans pre-temple destruction and post-temple destruction, Yavne, the rebuilding of Jewish life, the kind of the establishment of rabbinic Judaism. They established they should greet one another in the name of God. Right? So when you see somebody, you should say the name of God or a name of God. Now probably they didn't mean Yud Ke Vav Ke, right? But let's see what they say. Maybe yes. Right? So we see Boaz, they looked back to the Megillat root, and they see Boaz, he goes out into the field. And again, this is a very kind of non-sacred place, right? It's the field workers, right? This isn't part of a ritual observance. This isn't the offering of sacrifices. This is just a boss is going out to see how his workers are doing. And he says, Hashem is with you. And they say, Hashem should bless you. And it seems like at least in Megillah Ruth, they actually are using Yud Ke Vav Ke. They're using the name of God. So that might seem to be a little on the side of, if we have our two poles of don't take God's name in vain and bring God's name into the world and I'll bless you, very strongly on the side of bring Hashem's name to the world. Because again, it's not so medicinal. It's not so prescribed, right? It's a greeting. It's like, hey, what's up? That's not a formulaic, ritualized process. That's just a greeting. So he's very trending towards that one pole. And it also says in Shoftim that Hashem is another version where someone greeted someone with the name of God. God is with you, you strong warrior. Ve'omer al tavuz ki zakana imech. And okay, good. So all right, that's the beginning. Now ve'omer al tavuz ki zakana imech. It also says, and despise not your mother when she is old, i.e. one must not neglect customs which he inherits. So what is the Gemara saying here? We have a custom from the Tanakh of people calling each other B'Shem Hashem, with the name of God. And customs are important. We know that in Judaism. We uphold our minhagim. Don't neglect all customs. But then the Gemara says, but wait a minute. Go back in the image for a minute. The Omer, Eit lasot Hashem efru toratecha. Wait, did I skip something here? Right, okay. Now the Gemara is anticipating our big challenge, right? The Gemara says, unless you say that mentioning Hashem's name is prohibited, right? Because the Torah said, don't take God's name in vain. It says, and this is very radical, it is time to work for the Lord. They have made void your Torah, i.e. it is occasionally necessary to negate biblical precepts in order to perform God's will. And greeting another is certainly God's will. Rabbi Natan says, another interpretation of the verse, make void your Torah because it is the time for the work of the Lord, i.e. occasionally it is necessary to negate biblical precepts in order to bolster the Torah. Wow, very radical idea here. You get what it's saying? The Gemara is saying sometimes you have to negate, you have to void, you have to not do one Torah value in order to do a different Torah value. You have to you have to actually undo it, like that fear, to dig out, you have to kind of take it out in order to fulfill the Torah. So that's a very big statement here, not one that we take lightly or that we really use. It's a rabbinic tool that's a little too powerful. We don't really pull that one out very much. That sometimes you have to just negate a mitzvah in order to fulfill the rest of the Torah. But yet they're saying it here, and they're saying it here for the name of God. And this comes back, I think something maybe I mentioned the first time, that one can see brachot in general, and the bringing out of Shem Hashem into the world in a measured way, in a prescribed way, in a careful way, but also as a big radical innovation by Chazal. That this system of brachot, of mentioning God's name in all these different places maybe it existed, but it wasn't a highlight. It wasn't a big focal point of religious life. And Chazal said, this has got to become a big part of our religious life. As the temple's gone, we don't have that way of connecting with Hashem now. We need to bring Hashem out into the world. We need to bring Hashem out into our everyday lives, our eating and our commerce and the nature that we see and the history that we encounter. And probably people were saying at the time, how can you do that? The Torah says, don't do that. The Torah says you can't take Hashem's name in vain. You're violating the Torah. They thought it was so important to establish the centrality of brachot that they're willing to say, we recognize that there's a Torah value to say, don't take Hashem's name in vain. We recognize that actually we are violating that value in a little bit, but we think it's so important because we think by doing it, we're actually going to uphold the entire Torah. That's what Rabbi Natan is saying. Sometimes you have to cancel one piece of the Torah in order to uphold the rest of the Torah. That's how big of a deal they thought this was. And again, Chazal weren't someone to take that kind of stuff lightly, to negate a Torah mitzvah, right? But they thought it was very, very, very critical. And I think, if we think about what makes up Jewish spirituality today, what makes the religious life of a Jew, forget about identity and culture and history. Like if we think about what's the actual, religious life of a Jew today, brachot is a huge piece of it. Brachot and Shabbat. I think if you've got those two things down, you're mostly, you're like 89% of the way there in terms of Jewish spiritual life. Brachot are a huge way that we connect to Hashem and that we integrate Jewish spirituality into our everyday. And they didn't really exist in the form that we have today. There's no, if we look through Tanakh, there's that concept of blessing and there's the concept of invoking Hashem's name, but no one's stopping and saying brachot. You have that concept where you have to, after you eat, you should say a bracha, you should be satisfied and say kind of like a grace, a thank you. That's in this week's parsha. But the whole system, the rigorous system of brachot, is really a beautiful expansion of this consciousness by Chazal and a lot of innovation as well. But we also still have to be careful. Just because they said say lots of brachot, even to kind of undermine that one Torah precept to create this other system, they still were very careful. And I apologize, I forgot to translate this next one, but it's pretty quick. The Amar Rav Itim Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish Amar Tavaihu, right? Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both said, Kol hamevarech bracha she'ena tzricha over mishum lo tisa. Anyone who does a blessing that they don't need has violated lo tisa, the commandment of don't take God's name in vain, right? So this is now, it's like correcting the other way. You can see this a lot in Halacha. There'll often be, two poles, and you'll see kind of like a movement back and forth. You'll see it'll like swing, let's say we had, the first pole was the Torah says, don't take Hashem's name in vain. And then Chazal come along and say, we have to say lots of brachot, and it swings the other way. And then Chazal kind of, this is the next generation, the Amoraim kind of correct it back and say, well, it's true you have to say brachot, but if you say the wrong bracha or bracha you don't need, now you're going back and you're violating lo tisa. You're violating taking Hashem's name in vain. So there's like a dialectic tension that's kind of swinging back and forth, and it's through the generations, right? We had the Torah was pretty strong on not taking Hashem's name. The first generation, Tanaim, the first broad generation of rabbinic scholars, opening up the gates to brachot, to invoking Hashem's name in the world, and now the Amoraim, Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, who are the next generation, kind of pulling it back, saying, wait a minute, don't get ahead of yourself. If you say a bracha that's not needed, that's lo tisa. You violated one of the 10 commandments. And there's some debate among the Rishonim whether they meant that literally. Like, really, if you say a bracha which isn't needed, like, you had, you said you had a cookie and you said mizonot, and then you ate some pasta and you said another mizonot, right, in the same meal, not necessary. Have you really violated one of the 10 commandments by doing that? So some opinions in the Rishonim say, like, yes, actually it is. It's so serious. Some people say, no, this was kind of like, sometimes Chazal speak in like hyperbole, right? They'll say, anyone who does this is like they've committed murder, or anyone who does this is like they've committed idolatry, right? This is just kind of trying to, it's not meant to be taken literally, but it's a statement about the severity of this mitzvah and to really take it seriously. Unclear, it doesn't really matter so much for right now, but just want to note the move back to prescription, as Matt and Melissa said, like that brachot are like medicine, and not to be used willy-nilly. So if we use the analogy of medicine in the Torah, the bracha medicine doesn't exist so much. It's there in a little bit. Chazal come along and start prescribing it a lot for a lot of things, writing a lot of prescriptions, And then later Chazal are like, that's great, but stick to the prescription. Don't just think because there's a lot of prescriptions now that you should just go and, have a free-for-all with brachot. Any thoughts or reactions so far?
So my grandmother used to bless people all the time, and she was in the hospital. She was 98, and she just had a pacemaker put in, and she's all disoriented. She didn't know where she was, but the nurse walks in, and she's acting normal. She's blessing the nurse, and the nurse walks out, and then my grandmother turns to me and says, "You have to act nice to people and show them respect so they act nice to you." So,
Wow.
so she finally told me her secret for
Wow.
doing the blessing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that form, right, if we go back to calling out to this Gemara here, right, greeting people b'shem, right, that's, I think that's a little bit what she's talking about, right? She wasn't saying to the nurse who walks in, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shakol nivaro, right? It was a blessing of calling out and bringing God and the consciousness of God and the power of words and words of blessing into the encounter with another human being. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. That's a transformative thing. And that Chazal are very clear we should be doing. We should be bringing God's blessing and speaking God's blessing into our relationships and encounters with others. That's a very, very holy thing to do. Good. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, when you were talking about negating part of the commandments to fulfill another, it reminded me of what all of you Ravs are trained to do, which is listen to the complete story of what someone's going through, and you help guide them toward, this is where your emphasis needs to be, even if you can't fulfill that right now.
Right.
So is that where, when they teach that to you, is that where that comes from?
It's a good question. I think what's interesting about it, I think there's like the individual level, right? Someone comes and says, I really want to start keeping kosher, but also like I'm going to my in-laws' house and they don't keep kosher, and like what do I do, right? So that's like there's a tension between two Torah mitzvot, honor your father and mother, keep kosher, right? So in those individual cases, you have to like figure out how to balance those two things. Here, I think what's striking about it is it's not just for the individual; it's really a collective, right? It's like a legal thing. So it would be like if we said, I mean, I think maybe a contrast is when we shut down shuls, right? We said like, okay, we have we have the mitzvah of like davening b'tzibur, very important, and we have the mitzvah of pikuach nefesh. We need to kind of like cancel, so
for
to speak,
everyone.
one mitzvah, like put it on the side in order to be mekayim this greater mitzvah.
Thanks. That helps clarify that it's really about the collective. Thank you.
Yeah, because when Chazal are speaking, or at least the way we, as a legal, right, if this is a legal document, right, it's speaking about the law, not just the individual case. Yeah.
The other thing that was super helpful was this greeting and leaving people in the name of God. You know, I always was taught that when you say shalom, you're greeting in the name of God. It's one of God's names.
Yeah.
I don't happen to usually use that greeting, but I usually try to use God's name when I'm saying hello to someone and when I'm leaving their presence. And I know that we're supposed to bring God's name forth in the world, but I never saw it in print about the both ends of the conversation. So this is very helpful.
Yeah, and it's very striking even when you read Roots. Boaz is the model for that.
Boaz, when I saw that on the page, I said I'm going to go back and read it again. Yeah,
it's worth spending. Boaz is like the ideal, like Torah Jew of the Tanakh period, right? Like we think about models in Tanakh, who can we aspire to be like? Each hero in Tanakh has tremendous amounts to offer us, but some of them are kind of on different we can learn from David HaMelech, but we're not going to be David HaMelech. We can learn from Moshe Rabbeinu, we're not going to be Moshe Rabbeinu. We can learn from, Tzipor, we can learn from these people, but we're not going to be them. But Boaz is like someone you can kind of be, right? Ruth is someone you can kind of be. You can just a person going about their business, living a life, kind of an ordinary life. And we see the way that he just brings Hashem into the world in like a very organic and like sweet and deep way. And that's something we can model and aspire to do. And with that, I think we're going to pause for today. Quick note, I am likely going to be away next week and for sure away the week of the 16th. So let's plan on taking a 2-week hiatus. Well, I'm not sure about, I have to figure out what we're doing next week. So I will email this group midweek on our plans, but for sure the 16th I won't be here. But at the most it'll be a 2-week break and we'll start again on the 23rd. And I'll let you know about this coming Sunday.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you. Have a wonderful day. Daveners, I'll see you upstairs in a minute. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Morning, David. And happy Sunday to you.
Brian, how are you? Good work.
Good work. I am good, thank you. Always good to see you.
Good to be seen.
Larry, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I totally blanked. I don't know like what I was thinking, but I joined on for chakras and I'm like, oh, Halacha shir. I'll have to watch the.
I caught the end of the Rav Shir there. I forget which one that was.
It's all about Halacha. Halacha l'mais. So he does it Sunday at 8:30, and I just totally spaced today and made coffee and fed the cats and all kind of thing without realizing I was missing thing for like the past several weeks. So Larry, what was the topic today?
Oh, about it kind of went with the Ten Commandments, the first commandment about saying God's name in vain. What does it mean? And then the contra, there's another section of Gemara that says that you should go out in the world and use God's name a lot. So one extreme, you're supposed to be careful of how you use God's name. Another extreme, you're supposed to go out in the world and use God's name.
Interesting. Okay.
Good morning.
We're one short.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're one short.
Okay.
There's a lot of short people here, but we're
It's so good that Doug Klein has self-awareness.
Should I get started? Okay. We can get started.
Yay.
Rabbi Shlomo, Rabbi Shlomo, Rabbi Midrash. וכן שני חסורים המחישים את זה עד שיבא כסוף השליש יברכיה ביניהם ירסה ונח עלינו להן ועשינו שיבונה בית המקדש במהרה בימינו ושמחתכם ושמחה ושם לבא ברק עולם וכשם יכוניה אז מזמור שיר חנוך השבאי דוד אמן. Fachta misma choli pitaki sakita zrein simcha laman yizmel cholidam anal hai lamadaka Araini mezamin SP lados ale shabef Espori Rokshamar Bayalam Rakubin Yachid Chayhalmi Mal Shrakodach Magada Brachata Noi Mal Falabatish Machas Hodula Noi Kiru Vishma Yismach Levama Shirla Noi Karts Mastermi Yama Yamishwasa Sapru Vagli Meschwara Bachamim Tzav Kigada Anoi Emlam Ova No Rahu Akol Elohim Kika El Hamim Elim Anai Shemai Masa Brochan Elohei Yisrael Min Olam Ba'ad Olam V'yamru Kol Ha'am Amen B'Halal Enoi Rom Eloheinu V'yishachu L'Adam Alav Kadoshu Rom Eloheinu V'yishachu L'Akosho Kigadosh Ein Eloheinu V'hu Rachum Yechaper Avam L'Eshchis V'yabal L'Adonai Yisrael Chaber Chasach Chasala Noi Tzvos Iman Yisgav Ele Yaakov Sela Noi Tzvos Rashrei Adam B'Teach Bach Noi Hashem Achenu V'yam Kareinu Oshio Samecha B'Echasam Nashenu Chiksala Noi Ezreinu Maginu Hu Kivo Yismach Livenu Kivo Shem Kosho V'Tachi Chasacha Noi Elenu Kasher Chanolach Ashreyam Shechachalo Ashreyam Shalahav Bani B'Cha Sakha B'Tachti Yagal Libi V'Shasacha Asher Noi Kimalai Mizmor So Darim Kitov Anoyam Chasov V'Yador V'Dor Emunasa V'Hurachum Yechaper Avam V'Lei Yeshchis V'Yabor L'Shiva Po V'Yamaso Anoi Hashem Achenu V'Yam Kareinu Asher Shevesach Ayu V'Sal Ashreyam Shechachalo Ashreyam Shalahav Tilas Anoi Dar Pi V'Varech B'Sar Shalom Shalom Ved Anachim B'Rachim Et Havilam Hallelujah Imo Chadon Elam Al Hayik Siyan Levador Hallelujah Magid Acha Kucha Misut Hal Israel La Asal Chen Goy Mishpatim Bayrum Hallelujah. Ya Lu Hashemenai Kini Skav Shmalado Hoda Aretz Hashemayim Bayram Karamel Tihilo Chazrab Livnei Israel Amkarabo Hallelujah. Vesur Melchem Vizikin Vidich Lechem Bachlei Bazel Sansos Lehem Beshok Chesud Madar Chesud Hallelujah. Kohan Shematale, Kohan Shematale, Hallelujah, B'Chem Amen V'Amen. Brachashem, Shalchem Yerushalayim Hallelujah, Brachim El Yisrael, Osed Nifla Osavadav, Baruch Perelam, V'Yimalech Chodas Chortz Amen V'Amen. V'Yavarach David Esainu Al Einei Kavod. Tahu Adonai Him Asher Barachat Abraham, Bo Tzisor Meir Kasim, Sam Tam Shemar Avaham, Matzat Tzalo, Yamal Panacha, V'Charosim Amazing. There's Nani, Achiti, Amori Vizir. V'Hayam Bakatulihem, V'Yavur B'Sel Chayam V'Yavasha V'Ezra V'Hem, Yishlach Miswas, Kamo Eva Maimazim. V'Yisrael Sayad Hagadol Asher Sanoi, V'Mitzrayim V'Sanoi, V'Yamina V'Yanoi Moshe Abdav, Az Yashim Moshe V'Yisrael. Ozi V'Zim Nasiyavan, Zayli. Yeti Simin Khatiban. Kivarana Halacha, Moshe Balu Moshe Bahartzion, Spectaisa by Sinai Halacha, Bahai Adonai, Lamelacha Kalart, Mayamahu and Echadish Macha, Yishtabak, Yishimcha, God Makain. Brachos, Eros, Metavelam, Brachanoi, Yamalchado, Bati Brachos, Eros, Adonai, Eros, Bachev Shuvizimra, Melchakay Olamim, Yiskadav, Yiskadash, Mirabam, Amadi Rachir, saving, save a Chaychon of Vimachan, Chadov, Sra, Bagos, Makri Vimru, Amen, Yesh Miram, Orach, Elam, Maya, Yisparach, Yishtabach, Yispar, Visram, Save Israel, Glal, Shmeku, Shabrichu, the Elam in Kabach Hasavish Rasach, Hamasa, Amirum Yama, Vimru, Amen. Baruch es Adonai HaBarach. Baruch HaNabrach, Elam Boya, Brakat HaAdonai Mechlam, Yotzar B'choshat, Os HaShalom V'Yosakol. Tisbrach and Lehim Asavachama Seidecha, Be'am Me'or Sisar V'Gosala. Come in. V'cholam poskim hasihem yishav Torah b'shirav zimra rachim shabachim farim u'marisim makdishim amechim Hashem hamelch hagadol hagibor v'anorak v'shu v'cholam hakabalim alehem hamachu shemayim zavizav v'nosim v'shu zalzel lakdish esamanach hasrach v'safa v'ruavim hakaresha v'kum chachad onim v'onim b'yira Kadosh, 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 Anoitzos, Malochars, Kavodo, Veni Machayos Kadosh, Rosh Kadol, Nisasim Lumasrafim, Sama Shabachim Yermim, Rokoino, I mean, come on. Or Chadash Atzi Antaya, Veniska Chula Mail, Rokoino, Yatsemaros. Sima Ben Rohavi Mahaskil Ishman. Ravi Ainul Shalom Ebachim Pasraj, Vesalichenu Lertenu Kiel Payushusata, Uvana Machata Mika Amala Shama Kertanu Shimka Gadal Salabanes, Vesachai Chabiava, Brachataranai, Abachabim Israel, Biava, Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Yahavta Isa, you have the share. So Ushar Temsos is in the Asi Sema Sema. I don't know the Chamamas. The Darvadar who Kayam Shmakayam Chiso Nachan, the Makus of Amenas Alad Kayamas. Abasain of Aleno Abba Nano Aldar, Saint of Alcohol, Daros, Dacha, Arisham. Your trainer to so it's no pode in Matson, Shmacha, Eno Hinzu Asacha, as well. Alzajo. Tilo Selo Yambarach Marach Moshe Ben Israel Anushur Sim Charabavim Ruchulam. Mi Chabocha Elimanoi Mi Kamocha Nedar Bakodesh. Nurasilos as a Tala Shra Chadasha Shibachugo in Simcha Asafasayam Yachaglam Odu Mechuv Yamrum. Adonai Mo Chilam Boed Tzrisra Kuma Be'ez Israel. Udekin Emecha Yehuda Israel. Goleno I might special Kodesh Rabbi. I don't know anything. Adonai Sabasai Tisak He Yagid Yosaka Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Eloseinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Ayel Gadol Hagibor Avenra Elohim Gamel Chasidim Dilim Karen Yaakov Zocher Chashtei Avos Umedi Goel Lenei Bnei Lan Shema Yoav El Chazer Mashim Again Baruch Ata Adonai Again Abraham Ata Hagibor Elohim Mechei Mesim Taroshiach Machak Nesed Mechei Mesim Rachim Ravim Samech Lefim Rafei Cholim Matusrim ومكاين ونسال شيء لشيني أفار ميخم خبا غروس إنه ملخميس ومكاين مسك شوا لنمانة تالخ يسين بركناي نخيميسين.
أما نقدرش نشمخ بيلا مكشمش ما ديش شمخ كذا يا نبي أخذ كرازل زبيا ما.
نقدرش أشغلهم كشين شماكيشي مسبيش مرام كاكوسو يا نبي أخا بكرازل زبيا ما.
كدوش ناتسو ملوكالارتس كبودو.
كدوش أنويس فارس ملخارس كدو لمسام رخميرو.
كبود أدوناي مكمل.
دريك أشكال كسليمار.
أدوناي لعلم الله يصير دور بدور عليه.
يموخن عالم الهيكس يوم لبدور هليا لدور بدور نجيجا لخا ونيتسخ نسخين كدوش شخنا جيش شلهين بيمش مولد كما كانوا شقات بركناي يا كداش أتاخنين آدم داس من الله خنين بيخ ده بياس كبركناي خنا داس عشرين بيام سخا وكربين ما كانوا أكل سخا عشرين بيشوف عشان بنا خبركناي وسبب بيشوف صلاة خانوا أبينك ختان مخالا أنا ما كانوا كوشنا كما خيال صلاة بركناي خانوا بسلاخ رأينا بانين ربي ربينو قولين مهير على منشمخة كيف خزاقات بركناي وإسرائيل رفعينو أدناي رفعي هشيم بشيء كيس سياتا باليبرو فوش أو سنو كما خرفنا أمان ورحمان عطا بركناي رفعي خليم إسرائيل رأي خلينو أدناهينو أسا شانازس يسكومي ميني سواسو تبا بسين برخا بنرا بسبين جبا خبريش سنة كشيمة هتبس بركناي ريخاشانين تكاب شوفا قدو لخيرسينو سانيس كبيت سينو كابسينو ياد خامي بركم السارس بركناي مخبيت سيدي خيام إسرائيل أشوف شوفتينو كبير شنو بياتنا خط خلافة سنة من يجانا لخا وما خلين علينا تعالى لخا بخسر رحيم صديقين ويش بركناي ما خليه ستاكابيش بعد لما شيم أصي سوال خو هرشة قرقلبيت بخوي بخا مهيرا كريسو بازدي مهيرا ساكير وشابير وزماغير سخنين بربين ربين بين بركناي شبه أولي مخنين زيدين أصي دوين هخزني زيكني كويسرا بيا بلسس فهم يا جيبي أساك يلينو يمنا رخما خلنا هينو بسين سكتوب وخو هبا خيم شين خميس سيبخين إمهم لنبوش كي بخابطات بركناي يشان وتاك صديقين بيلي شلون يرخى برخين دشوف سيسكم مسكين فرتا وبني أصحاب كرابة بين بينان ولم بخيسة في مهيرا سوخة تخين بركناي بني شلون أتماخ دافيد أبدخا مهيرا أتماخ كنون تخا كيلو شو سخا كيفينو كين بركناي ما تمير كنشوا شما كلينو هينو كوسا كلينو بخبير برخين أرسون أسبيو سينو كيلو شمير غاز سخيناتا وفناخا ماخينو ريكا ماتيشينو كياتا شمير غاز وقيسرا برخين بركناي شمير تبيلا بتسي أنا هنا بام قيسرا وفيز وياسام عشان أسابودا لبرسا خبيش إسرائيل سام Baba, Sabay Rason, Lucy Rason Timid, Abadas Sirmecha, Zachazan Anenu, Veshu Chalasim Rachim Rachanai, Amachazer, Shekhin Selasia, Modim Anachulach, Shata Kuarno, Lahain, Nibel in the red. Surah Chayim again, Shano Atahu, Rabador, and Alcha, Una Sabay Sacha, Al Chaynu, Amasim Yadacha, Beam Nishma Seno, Kuruslach, Beam Nisacha, Shabachal Yom Imanu, Beam Nifasacha, Betavasacha Shalais, Belka Sarayim, Atavchilo, Rachmacha, Marchain, Klusacha, Melam Kimulach, Beam Kulam Yisrak, Yisram, Shimkama Canting, Led, Bachal Chayim, Yidu Kasala, by Chimpames, or Shoseno as a Senosala, Baruch Atadonai, Atav Shimcha, Chanel Hadas, Eloheinu, and Senu, Archenu Baracha, Hamshalash, Vatera, Hakasubayade, Bosha Badacha, Amura Pi, Aron, Abanab, Konim, Ankudashacha, Mor, Rechakai, Navi Shmracha,
Yiratzon.
Yer, Nav Halacha, Bikunacha,
Ken Yiratzon.
Yisa, Nav Halacha, Visemacha Shalom.
Man, Ken Yiratzon.
Baracha, Chasa Rachim, Alenu, Kaisramecha, Archenu Vinu, Kalanu, Echar, Barbanacha, Ki Barbanacha, Nasatalana, Henu, Paraskaim, Abaskasa, Utzadaka, Racha, Rachim, Chaimishlam, Batobenacha, Rekas, and Israel, Asa, Bakasha, Abishamacha, Barakataranai, Rekas, Israel, Mashallah. Ezra Shenu Adara Kavar Shmecha Vasina Bachaper Karsino Man Shmecha Iskadav Iskadash Mirabah Almadi Rachir Sev and Lich Makusev Chaychan Vim Chanu Chayduchob Israel Bagaliz Magrivim Ru Amen Yeshmira Barach Yalav Me Amaya Yisbarach Yishtabach Yisbar Yisraman Yisrav 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 Shmei Kushabrichu Le'ela Min Kaber Chasav Yishrasa Shrosan Echamasa Ta'amir Mema Vimru Amen Asher Shesach Yosach. Tilasa Naida, he the Rakwasa Shumshum, led Manach, Rakmatavilam, Aliyah, Lamatzech, these were led Yanach. The resolution. I know Shemachin of Yam Karain, of Alciango, of Oshabai Tashav. The Ataka Shiv Shakti, let's Rabba Carl Zazavimar, Kadosh, 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 anoints us, Malach hearts go to coming. Betisa Ini Ruach, Ashma Acharai, Korash Gado, Rukwood, and I'm coming. And my mother. Brooke Geber Sharif Taklai Noi, Noi Miftachu, Bichu Badanayad, Kiba Noi Tomim, Biftichu Bachar Yudei Shmecha, Yuazapta Shachanoi, Anna Chavetz Mansko, Yagdot Ravi Adir, Yiskadav Yiskash Mirabah, Amadi Rachir Sevin Likak, Save Chayachana, Bimachano Chayachov Israel, Bagaz Bank Rivim Ru, Amen, Yeshmira, Warach, Elav Meamaya, Yisbarach, Yishtabach, Yispar, Visman Sev, Yisrav, Slav, Slash, Mekushabri, Le'ela min kar berchasa v'shrasa v'shchasa nechamasa ta'amiru meima v'imru amen. Tiskabel soson v'son v'chol Yisrael kadama v'yishmai v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemai v'chayim. Aleinu v'al Yisrael v'imru amen. O seshalom v'mav. Hu ya seshalom. Aleinu v'al Yisrael v'imru amen. Aleinu v'shalom. كما خشى خاهي وما أتيمخ بخبر فسوسخن وبنا مع بيان وخرت ويوم هي نخار وشما خار يسكدا ويسكدا شمي ربا فأما دبراخ يوسي بياميخ مخوسي بخي خون وبيامي خون وخير خال بيس إسرائيل فأغلا بزمان قريب يمرو أمين يهشمي رب وراخ الألام ومي أمايا Yisbarach, Yishtabach, Yisbar, Yisraman, Yisnasei, Yisadar, Yisalem, Yisalam, Shmei Kushab, Richu, Eila, Minka, Berchasa, Vishirasa, Tishbachasa, Venachamasa, Ta'amiram, Biama, Vimru, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba, Min Shemaya, Achayim, Aleinu, Viako, Yisrael, Vimru, Amen. Oseh, Shalom, Rama, Ilya, Shalom, Aleinu, Viako, Yisrael, Vimru, Amen. Hayam Yom Rishon B'Shabbat. Susha Meshechem, V'Zuvnei V'Yamachlod, Mihu Samal Chavod, Anoy Tzvot Samal Chavod, Salah. Yiskada V'Yiskada Shmei Rabba, V'Amad Divrach Yerusei V'Yamlich Machusei, V'Chayechon V'Yamechon V'Chayei D'Chol Beis Yisrael, V'Agala V'Zman Kariv V'Imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba V'Orach V'Olam Amei Omaya. Yisbarach V'Yishtabach V'Yispar V'Yisraman V'Yisnasei, V'Yisadar V'Yisalev V'Yisalam, Shmei D'Kudusha B'Richu, V'Eila Min Kol Berchasa V'Shirasa, Tushbachasa V'Nechamasa, Ta'amiram B'Yama V'Imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'Chayim Aleinu V'Yako Yisrael V'Imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Yamav, Huya Oseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yako Yisrael V'Imru Amen.
Ezri meim Adonai, Osei Shamayim Haaretz.
Shamayim Haaretz.
Hayitei lamo regla Hayidum Shomrecha.
Yitin lamo regla Hayidum Shomrecha.
Yinei lo yelu v'lo yishan Shomer Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael.
Adonai Shomrecha, Sofaya Yimenecha.
Adonai Shomrecha, Sofaya Yimenecha.
Yom Hashem Echayeka Kavirech V'Alayla.
Yom Hashem Echayeka Kavirech V'Alayla.
Adonai Yishmor Chamikro Yishmor Et Nafshecha.
Adonai Yishmor Chamikro Yishmor Et Nafshecha.
Adonai Yishmor Tzeifu V'Lechayecha V'Yallah. Okay, no Beit Yisrael, no Stim B'Tzor, Shivya, Odim B'Yom Rosh Hashanah, Rakim, Alim Yotzim, Yitzhar, Levachav Yashavel, Levachav Yashavel,
Amen. Morning, everybody. Mishnah Hay, workers' rights. Ochel Poel Kishut Afilu Bedinar. Talking about how a worker, when working in the fields, by Torah law, is permitted to eat from the fields in which he's working. And this is going to stipulate that even a great amount. You can even eat cucumbers worth a dinar. It's a lot of cucumbers, a lot of very fine, valuable cucumbers. You can eat them. You can eat them. And also a group of dates, even if it's worth a dinar, which is a lot of money, right? So you can. It's not. We're not capping the worth of what you can eat. Well, in the fields, you can eat as much as you want. You can eat the best stuff. It's open season. Rabbi Elazar Chisma Omer, Rabbi Elazar Chisma does stipulate caps, says lo yachal pol yoter al scharo, because you can't eat more than you're paid. So if you get hired to get $10 a day to pick strawberries, according to Rabbi Elazar Chisma, you can't eat $12 worth of strawberries. That you cannot eat more than your wages. Chachamim say no, you are permitted to. But the Chachamim say you should teach the person, shelo yeh ravtan. Don't be a gluttonous person. Don't come in and just eat all day long, even though legally you can. Because you'll close the door in front of you. What does this mean? If the field owner sees that you're someone who walks in the field, and even though legally you can, but you're just eating fruit all day long, you're eating all the fruit, he's losing money on fruit because of you, because you're eating it all, even though you're legally entitled to, you're not going to get hired again. You're not going to have a job again. So you want to gently give them the advice, don't eat too much so you get a job again. But you do have the right. They maintain the right of the person to eat even more than their wages are paid. So we see a very strong Torah right to eat whilst working. That's protected, to a large degree, that you can even eat more than your wages are. And the Chachamim are not going to take it away. They're just going to say, we want to make sure people don't hurt themselves and eat themselves out of a job in the future. And that's the mission for today. We'll say Kaddish Yisrael Rabbanan, page 52.
Amen. Mincha Marav this week, 7:55. Shachrit, 7:30. Please sign up if you haven't signed up. Have a great day. At 7:30. 7:55.